Northbridge, Friday, 7:46 p.m. The wine glasses clinked before I walked in. From behind the gold-trimmed double doors of Edelweiss, laughter rose like champagne bubbles. Effortless, excessive, intoxicating. I smoothed my black dress, adjusted the cream envelope in my clutch, and stepped inside. They were seated at our old table, of course, the one near the fireplace, where he had once slid a ring across a dessert plate and asked me to build a life with him. Now, 15 years later, he toasted their life's quiet death with a woman half my age. Andrew didn't see me at first. He was too caught up in his performance, pouring her wine with the same hand that used to cradle our newborns, smiling the smile he used to save for me. She leaned toward him, a practiced glint in her eyes, crimson lips curving with satisfaction, the very shade I had found on his collar 3 months earlier. I approached the table with slow, purposeful steps. Andrew finally noticed me. His smirk didn't falter, not yet. He leaned back in his chair, letting his eyes wander over me with that familiar blend of arrogance and curiosity. "Claire," he said, lifting his glass. "Didn't expect you." I smiled politely. "Congratulations on your freedom." And then I placed the envelope on the table. Rebecca, or Lena instead, eyed it. Andrew's fingers hesitated before sliding them toward himself. He opened it with the nonchalance of a man who believed he had nothing left to hide. That's the problem with men like Andrew. They never imagine the wives they silence might one day roar. As he read, his face transformed, arrogance giving way to disbelief, then dread. His hands trembled. He scanned the pages again. The DNA results, 3 clean scientific statements, 3 undeniable truths. He was not the biological father of our children. Not one, not any. The silence at that table was exquisite. Lena's fork hovered midair, her mouth slightly agape, unsure if she should keep pretending this was a celebration. Andrew's jaw clenched, eyes darting between the document and me. "You're lying," he murmured, almost too low to hear. "Am I?" I replied calmly. "You were careful, Andrew. Surgical, even, but not careful enough." The maitre d' stepped closer, sensing tension, but I held up a hand. "We're fine," I said, still looking at my soon-to-be ex-husband. "We're just closing the chapter." And with that, I turned and walked away. But I didn't walk out. I needed you to know how this story began, because the ending, oh, the ending, is far from over. Let me take you back to the beginning. 3 months earlier, Tuesday, 9/17 a.m. The shirt smelled faintly of mint and guilt. His gym bag was tucked behind rows of polished Italian leather shoes, just slightly unzipped. I hadn't been snooping. I was gathering clothes for dry cleaning, the same routine I'd done 1,000 times without incident. But that day, something made me pause. A sliver of white fabric peeked out. A shirt, his shirt, folded wrong. Andrew, ever meticulous, would never have tossed it in so carelessly. I tugged it out, and there it was, a smear of red, sharp against the ivory cotton, lipstick, blood red, not the smudge of a rushed kiss on the cheek. This was deliberate, transferred through closeness, heat, skin on skin, not mine. That was the moment at the first crack split open. I stood there, frozen in the walk-in closet of our 4-bedroom house in Northbridge Pines. My fingers clenched the shirt. My ears roared with silence. Some women scream when they find out. Others throw things, break dishes, shout profanities. I went cold, not because I lacked rage, but because something deeper took hold. A need to understand, to know how far the lie went. How long had it lived inside my walls, tucked beneath pressed collars and coffee kisses and PTA meetings? Andrew was a renowned psychology professor at Northbridge University, published, polished, admired. He gave TED Talks on human behavior and emotional transparency. Irony never tasted so bitter. To the world, we were perfect. 2 academics, 3 beautiful children, a house with a white porch swing. "Claire makes it all possible," he would say at faculty dinners. His hand warm on my back, his voice thick with pride. I wouldn't be where I am without her. And I used to believe it. But something had shifted. It began subtly. Work trips extended. Weekend conferences doubled. He was mentoring more students. Lena Torres' name began appearing more often, first in his lectures, then on his schedule, then in his texts. I ignored it. At first, I wanted to believe, we all want to believe, that our person is incapable of becoming the villain. or until the evidence makes belief impossible. That night I lay in bed, the shirt folded beside me like a ghost. Andrew was at a guest lecture in Chicago. I stared at the ceiling, the fan humming a rhythm older than our marriage. I didn't cry. I made a plan. Before everything unraveled, before lipstick stains and legal documents and quiet war, I was Claire Monroe, wife of Professor Andrew Monroe, Northbridge's golden couple, as the local paper once called us. The headline still lives in a scrapbook somewhere. Brilliance meets grace, the Monroes of Hawthorne Lane. I hated the headline. Andrew loved it. To the world we were a perfect equation, his intellect, my empathy, his success, my support. He taught psychology of power and persuasion at Northbridge University. I'd once taught literature at a small liberal arts college, before taking a temporary pause to raise our children. That pause turned into a decade. We lived in a colonial-style home in Hawthorne Lane, with black shutters, ivy-wrapped columns, and a front porch swing that creaked sweetly when the wind stirred. To outsiders it looked like a Norman Rockwell painting with Wi-Fi. 3 children, 2 boys, 1 girl, our pride and pulse. Morning chaos, soccer practices, ballet recitals, piano lessons, science fairs, burnt dinners. Chaos, we learned to choreograph. Neighbors envied us, friends admired us, students idealized us. I was Professor Monroe's lovely wife, the woman who made lemon bars for departmental meetings and hosted summer barbecues where faculty mingled with alumni. Claire makes it all look effortless, they'd say. But it wasn't effortless. It was intentional. I traded lesson plans for laundry cycles, poetry analysis for permission slips, book talks for baby monitors. Not because I was weak, because I believed in the team. Andrew used to say our marriage was a high-functioning ecosystem. He'd explain it like this. I handle the external world, the academic battlefield. You hold down the internal, emotional stability, parenting, and memory calendars. We thrive because we specialize. He even drew diagrams. Arrows, circles, me in the center. I wore that idea like armor, this notion that I was essential even if unseen. But here's the thing about being invisible. Eventually people forget you're there. We met in graduate school. I was studying Victorian literature. He was pursuing social psychology. I still remember the first time I heard him speak in class. Confident, incisive, magnetic in that knows he's smart kind of way. He challenged the professor on ethical theory. I challenged him afterward in the hallway about tone. He smiled like I'd just passed a test. You're dangerous, he'd said. You're annoying, I replied. We were married 2 years later. I believed in Andrew. I believed in what we were building. In long nights, eating takeout on the floor of our first apartment, in chasing tenure and babies at the same time, in driving old cars to save for the kids' education, in whispering dreams beneath comforters with spit-up stains. He made me feel like we were unstoppable. He used to tell people, Claire is the only person who sees through me and still stays. I didn't know how prophetic that was. When he was offered tenure, I threw him a party. When he published his second book, I planned the launch event. When he received a university award for community engagement, I stitched the children into matching outfits and clapped the loudest in the auditorium. Every achievement of his, I wore like it was mine too, because I believed it was. I remember one night, years ago, after a gala where he'd been honored with a regional teaching award, we slow danced in the living room. The kids were asleep upstairs. He held me close and said, "You're the only part of this life that feels real." I held on to that moment for years, long after it stopped being true. Looking back now, I see the signs. The way he used to sigh at my stories over dinner, the way he praised my parenting in public but questioned my judgment in private, the way he gradually stopped introducing me by name at events, simply gesturing and saying, "This is my wife," as if my identity had fused into his title. But back then I didn't question it. I told myself it was just the stress of academic politics. I justified the emotional drift as seasonal. I romanticized his distance as intellectual intensity, because if I let myself doubt it, the whole illusion would collapse. And I had 3 little reasons to keep believing. I poured everything into the children. I made organic baby food. I learned to French braid hair. I hand-sewed Halloween costumes. I knew every allergy in every lunchbox in the 2nd grade class. I was the mom who remembered every birthday, every recital, every field trip form. People say motherhood is thankless. That's not quite right. It thanks you in the form of sleepy hugs and crooked crayon drawings. But what it doesn't give you, especially in a marriage like mine, is partnership. When Andrew published his third book on influence and manipulation in professional hierarchies, he thanked me in the acknowledgments, to Claire, who keeps me grounded even when I resist gravity. People told me how romantic that was. They didn't know that by then gravity was the only thing still pulling us into the same house. And still, I kept believing. Even when he forgot our anniversary, even when he left conferences early, he came home late. Even when I found an unfamiliar perfume on his scarf, he told me it was probably from the Uber driver, because we had built a life, and I didn't know how to unbuild it until that Tuesday morning. That one small smear of lipstick on an otherwise ordinary shirt became a magnifying glass. I looked through it and saw everything I hadn't wanted to see. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just that my marriage might be broken, it was that it might never have been real to begin with. It didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly like the way ice thins in late winter, quiet, deceptive, and dangerous. The first signs were small. Andrew started working late, first once a week, then twice. Then it became routine. Back-to-back sessions, he'd say. New research deadlines, faculty reviews. He always had an explanation. Logical, rational. He was a man of academia, after all. Every excuse came with bullet points. I didn't question it. I ran the house. Picked up the kids, cooked the meals, managed the school calendar, smiled at the PTA meetings, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Wore lipstick, he said. It made me look approachable. The distance between us became normal. At first I tried. I planned date nights, Italian restaurants, jazz bars, even that weekend getaway to the Vermont cabin where we once got snowed in for 3 days and didn't mind. He always had a reason to cancel, or if he came, he spent the evening glued to his phone. "It's the department chair," he'd mutter. "Just a quick email, sorry." Quick became constant. I bought new lingerie, the kind that used to make him pause mid-sentence. Now it earned me a distracted glance and a kiss on the forehead. I told myself it was the stress. Men under pressure shut down emotionally. He was overloaded, overworked. That's what I told my sister anyway. "You sure he's not just over it?" she asked once, voice low over the phone. "He's not that guy, Em," I said too quickly. "He's just exhausted. The grant cycle's brutal this year." She didn't push. She didn't need to. The silence was louder than her doubts. I became an expert at making excuses. For him, for us, for the feeling I couldn't shake. Sometimes, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find the space beside me cold. I'd hear the quiet hum of his voice down the hall. "Couldn't sleep," he'd say. "Too much on my mind." I believed him, because not believing would mean confronting the truth, and I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. Then came the golf. Andrew never played before, not seriously, but suddenly he was hitting the greens every weekend. "Networking," he said. "Every major donor plays." I nodded. Of course. Everything he did was for the future, for us. That's how he'd always framed it. His success was our security. His time away is an investment in our shared life. But the receipts started piling up. Hotel stays, late checkouts, dinners for two, and the name that kept appearing, Lena Torres. She was new to the department, smart, ambitious, 29, with the kind of hungry energy that universities love. Andrew said she reminded him of himself at that age. "She asked good questions," he told me. "She's going places." One of those places was our bed. I still didn't suspect the truth, not until the day of our anniversary. 15 years. I'd planned something simple, elegant, a weekend in Providence, the same inn where we'd gone the summer before the twins were born. I even found the old bottle of red we loved, and called ahead to reserve the same corner room with the clawfoot tub. I just needed to make sure he was free. His calendar was synced to mine, but I wanted to double-check. He was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the counter. A single notification, just one. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the familiarity of them. "Last night was perfect, can still taste you." When are you telling her? Lena. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the phone. He'd used the same passcode since graduate school. The message thread was encyclopedic. Photos, plans, pet names, jokes at my expense. "She's planning some kind of surprise," Lena had written. "Poor Claire still thinks we're celebrating something." They'd mock me while I folded laundry. planned hotel getaways while I helped the twins finish their volcano project, shared whispered moans while I sat in recital halls clapping for our daughter. 8 months of betrayal catalogued in perfect digital clarity. I didn't cry. Not yet. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it, made his coffee, kissed him on the cheek as he left. Then I walked into the bathroom and vomited until my throat burned. That night I sat on the bedroom floor. This room had been our sanctuary, where we'd whispered baby names and read books side by side, where I miscarried twice and we held each other crying into pillows, where we laughed during storms and made love on slow Sunday mornings. Now it felt like a crime scene. I sat in the dark and stared at his nightstand. Nothing had changed, but everything had. I was tired of making excuses, tired of shrinking myself to protect his shine, tired of twisting myself into someone palatable, pleasant, and invisible. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw things. I was going to burn it down, quietly, surgically, and with receipts. I waited until the children were asleep. The house was still, wrapped in that quiet kind of darkness that comes only after a long day of pretending everything's fine. Andrew came home late. He smelled like a hotel soap and something sweeter, something that wasn't mine. He tossed his keys to the ceramic bowl by the door like always, slipped off his shoes. Didn't look for me. He didn't expect me to be awake. But I was waiting in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, his side. When he stepped in, he paused, startled, only for a moment. Then he smoothed his expression and said, "Hey, what are you doing up?" I held his gaze. "Are you sleeping with Alina Torres?" There was no tremble in my voice, no tears, just the question delivered like a verdict. He didn't flinch, didn't stammer, didn't lie. He walked over to his nightstand, took off his watch, and placed it gently down like he was clocking out of something. Yes. That one word broke everything I hadn't already broken myself. How long? Does it matter? It should have, but in that moment the timeline was irrelevant. Whether it had been months or years, the betrayal had already reached its destination. Here, now United States. He looked at me like I was an interruption, like I had disrupted some great, important thought he'd been carrying. I want a divorce, Claire. No emotion, no apology, just a clean incision, like a surgeon making the first cut. I stared at him, trying to find something, anything in his eyes. The man I married, the father of my children, the person who used to write me poems on napkins, gone. What had happened to us, I asked, not because I didn't know, but because I needed to hear him say it. He shrugged. I've outgrown this. Outgrown. Like a pair of old shoes. Like I was some phase he'd been gracious enough to tolerate until now. This life, he continued, gesturing vaguely around the bedroom. It's not who I am anymore. I've spent 15 years in this routine, this domestic loop. I'm 45, Claire. If I'm going to start over, it has to be now. I wanted to scream, but all I said was, we built this life together, every part of it, you and me. He laughed, bitter and condescending. You built a nest, Claire. I built an empire. The words landed like bricks. I had given up my career, carried our children, packed his lunches, smiled through his lectures and his book signings and his rising stardom, and now I was a nest, a thing to be left behind. I save lives, he said, voice tightening. Every day. What do? Bake cupcakes? Volunteer at the library? My throat burned. I had held his mother's hand as she died. I had covered for him when he forgot the kids' birthdays. I had stayed awake through stomach bugs and nightmares and fevers. I'd anchored his world so tightly he never once had to think about how it all held together. And now I was irrelevant. You'll be taken care of financially, he added, as if discussing a business merger. The kids will adjust. Children do. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a man who had fallen out of love. This was a man who had rewritten the entire narrative so he could feel righteous about burning it all down. He slept in the guest room that night. I didn't sleep at all. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out when exactly our love had died. Maybe it wasn't the lipstick. Maybe it wasn't even Lena. Maybe it was slow. So slow I mistook its decay for evolution. The next morning he left before sunrise. I heard the front door click softly shut. On the kitchen counter he left a business card, a divorce attorney, clean, clinical, cold. I made my coffee, got the kids ready, packed lunches, kissed foreheads, and then I stared at that business card and felt something new crawl up my spine. Not heartbreak, not sadness. This man had orchestrated the end of our marriage like a chess match. He believed he'd already won. What he didn't know, what he would never see coming, was that I had just begun to play. The morning after Andrew left his lawyer's card on our kitchen counter, I made my call. Her name was Evelyn Grant, a woman whose reputation had sent shivers through Northbridge's legal community, divorced twice, brutal in court, known to reduce opposing counsel to stammers with nothing but a raised eyebrow, exactly the kind of woman I needed. We met in her office above a historic bank building downtown. Her office smelled like cedar and strategy. She didn't offer comfort. She offered clarity. "Document everything," she said, sliding a leather-bound notepad across her desk. "Especially the money. That's where men like your husband keep their real secrets." That night, after the kids had fallen asleep to reruns and hot cocoa, I crept into the home office Andrew no longer used. The safe was behind a bookshelf hidden poorly. He never thought I'd look. He'd assumed, like so many powerful men, that silence equals submission. Inside were 15 years of files, tax returns, investment statements, property deeds, partnership agreements with names I had never seen before. I stayed up until 3 a.m., sorting paper into piles, highlighting numbers, scribbling questions. By dawn, I had found it, a name that appeared again and again. Withdrawals from our joint account, $4,500 here, $6,000 there. Every month, every quarter, quiet, patterned, almost invisible unless you were looking. Over 2 years, more than $220,000 had disappeared. The next day, I met with the bank manager. He hesitated again. Then I dropped Evelyn Grant's name, and suddenly the printer started humming. Calder Ridge Holdings was an LLC, registered under Andrew's name. No business description. No associated partners. Just a P.O. box address and a trail of disappearing funds. I returned to Evelyn with a folder full of questions. She paged through the statements, her red nails tapping lightly on each flag number. "This isn't just hiding money," she said. "This looks long-term, coordinated. He's been preparing for this divorce longer than you think." My stomach dropped. How long had he been planning to leave me? In our next meeting, Evelyn mentioned a name. Dr. Sebastian Holt. "He came up in another case," she said. "Used to work at Northbridge Fertility Center. Left quietly a few years ago. Your husband was part of that clinic's advisory board, wasn't he?" I nodded, remembering how proud Andrew had been. He wasn't just on the board, he was the founding ethical consultant, spoke at conferences, pushed policy changes, even wrote a paper on reproductive transparency. The irony was suffocating. It took 5 phone calls and a web of polite big deflections before I found Dr. Holt. He agreed to meet at a coffee shop outside the city, away from campus eyes. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind of people carry when they know things they're not supposed to know. "I've been waiting for this day," he said without preamble. "I just didn't know which of us would break first. Your husband with his arrogance, or me with my conscience." I didn't interrupt. I let him speak. What he told me turned my stomach inside out. There had been issues at the fertility center. Quiet ones, subtle ones, embryos not matching genetic reports, procedures logged incorrectly, couples with unexplained failed cycles. Dr. Holt started noticing inconsistencies. Lab results that didn't align. Specimens were logged under names that didn't appear in medical files. When he pushed for answers, the director dismissed him. When he pushed harder, his contract wasn't renewed. But before he left, he uncovered something chilling. Specimen substitution orders, authorized under the label of quality concerns. No donor identity listed. No consent forms matching the modifications. Andrew knew, he said. He wasn't just aware. He was complicit. I felt my skin go cold. Andrew and I had undergone multiple rounds of IVEF at that very clinic. Our twin boys, and then later our daughter. Each cycle is a heartbreak. Each success is a miracle. Now I had to ask the question I never imagined asking. "In our case," I whispered, did he switch the sample?" Dr. Holt looked at me with something between apology and fury. He slid a USB drive across the table. I pulled what I could before I left. Lab reports, emails, internal memos. "There's a file with your name." I didn't cry. Not yet, but my throat closed like it had swallowed fire. That night after the kids went to sleep, I opened the drive on my laptop. There it was. My name, my chart, and one line under procedural notes. Specimen replacement authorized by A. Monroe. Genetic risk factor, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Use anonymous donor. No disclosure to patient. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Andrew's heart condition. The one he never wanted to talk about. A 50% chance of inheritance. A career killer for a man obsessed with image. A man who couldn't risk the idea that his own children might be flawed. So he took my consent, my body, my hope, and rewrote the genetic code of our children without telling me. This wasn't an affair. This was a design. He had built a family based on lies, carefully edited for optics and ambition. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I would make sure the world knew too. The USB drive stayed in my purse for hours after I left the cafe. I couldn't bring myself to open it, because some truths once seen can't be unseen. I busied myself with dinner, homework, piano practice, and spelling quizzes. I read Goodnight Moon to my daughter with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I kissed foreheads and tucked them in beneath dinosaur sheets and princess quilts. Then when the house was silent, I opened my laptop, and I let the truth pour in. Emails, memos, lab records, lines of cold clinical language, void of emotion, but saturated in betrayal. And in the middle of it all, my name, my case file. A sentence that changed everything. Specimen replacement authorized, patient not informed, donor ID, anonymous, justification, hereditary cardiac risk. I read it 3 times before I could breathe. Andrew had decided about our children, about their genetic identity without me. He had edited out his bloodline and installed another without my knowledge, like swapping out a part in a machine. He'd taken my body and our story and rewritten it behind my back. And what hurt the most was that he hadn't done it for love or fear or even to protect me. He'd done it to protect himself. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there with 1,000 questions crawling across my skin. Who were they? Did it matter? Did I love them any less? Of course not. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't about biology. It was about consent, about truth, about building a family with someone who had been playing a solo game of God. The next day, I scheduled an appointment with a discreet private lab in the next county. DNA testing. I collected hair from my son's brushes, saliva from their toothbrushes, one of Andrew's old combs from the master bathroom, where he hadn't stepped foot in weeks. I labeled everything carefully. No room for doubt. I dropped the samples off in a sterile envelope with shaking hands. The waiting was the worst part. 5 business days, they said. I checked my inbox every hour, refreshed the page like prayer. In the meantime, Andrew's lawyer had become aggressive. They were questioning my mental stability, my ability to care for the kids, offering a financial settlement that wouldn't cover a year's worth of groceries, pushing for a custody agreement that would grant him equal rights, although he had already abandoned the truth of fatherhood before they were even born. He didn't want to be a father. He wanted to be seen as one, and I was done letting him have that. On the 5th day, the email came. Subject DNA results, Monroe family and confidential. I opened it in the pantry, the only place I knew I wouldn't be interrupted. The document was only 1 page. Clean, professional, precise. Alleged father, Andrew Monroe. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Conclusion, Mr. Monroe is excluded as the biological father of all tested children. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. Then I printed 3 copies, one for Evelyn, one for the safety deposit box I'd just opened under my own name, and one that I sealed in a cream-colored envelope, marked with the Northbridge Fertility Center logo I'd pulled from Andrew's home office drawer. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. The grief had crystallized into something hard or cold, clean, sharp. This wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't even just medical fraud. It was theft. He had stolen my right to choose, to know, to understand, to prepare, to decide for myself whether I wanted children with anonymous DNA. And worse, he had shaped their very existence, their biology, their futures, based on his vanity. He'd built a legacy not from love, but from fear. And now, I would burn it down. I began documenting everything, organizing files, dates, and statements. I updated Evelyn. She was silent for a long moment when she saw the DNA results. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "You're not just dealing with divorce anymore. You're dealing with..." The legacy demolition. Exactly. I started researching not divorce law, not custody, but fertility fraud, medical ethics violations, case studies, court precedents. I read about doctors who'd used their sperm, about clinics that had mislabeled embryos, families who discovered the truth decades later through 23 and me kits and suspicious blood types. But nowhere did I find a case like mine. A husband deliberately ensuring he wouldn't be the biological father, hiding behind professionalism, using science like a scalpel, not to heal, but to manipulate. This wasn't just betrayal, this was premeditated deceit. I looked at my children sleeping one night, their chests rising and falling in unison. I felt no distance from them. They were mine, but they had been born into a lie. And that liar wore a tailored suit and gave keynote speeches about ethics. That lie kissed them goodnight, while hiding a truth so fundamental it should have unraveled him from the inside. But he didn't unravel. He celebrated. He moved in with Lena. He invited her to school concerts, posted smiling photos of their new chapter. And that's when I knew I would not confront him in private. This wasn't going to be an argument in the kitchen. This was going to be a reckoning. Public, legal, thorough. Andrew Monroe had rewritten our family's origin story. Now it was my turn to write the ending. Once I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't let it go. The affair was one thing, the financial deceit another. But the fertility fraud? The rewriting of genetics, of blood, of identity, that was war. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore, it was about justice. Not just for me, but for every woman who had walked into a fertility clinic hoping for a miracle, and walked out unknowingly carrying a lie. I called Evelyn first. I need more than a divorce, I told her. She paused, sensing something had shifted in me. Then you need someone who investigates beyond the courtroom. A specialist in healthcare ethics violations and medical fraud, recommended through Evelyn's underground network of if things get ugly professionals. He was direct, focused, and most importantly, he didn't flinch when I showed him the evidence. The DNA report, the clinic memos, Andrew's signature authorizing anonymous donors without consent. Dawson tapped the folder thoughtfully, then said the words I'd been waiting for. This could be criminal. We met the following week at a nondescript government building. Dawson had already begun an active file. He explained that Northbridge Fertility Center had long been a closed circle, powerful board, quiet settlements, no external audits in over a decade. They protected themselves well, he said. But your case, your husband's involvement, this could crack it wide open. He needed 3 things: testimony from insiders, a financial trail proving motive or benefit, evidence of a pattern, more victims. I nodded. I'll get them. And I did. I started with the money. Over the next 2 weeks, I went through every financial file Andrew had ever left behind. I found shell companies, multiple accounts, funds rerouted through consulting firms, and filtered into overseas investment portfolios. I traced over $500,000 in undocumented income tied to Northbridge Medical Advisory Group, a shadow entity with only one visible member, Andrew Monroe. All supposedly payments for consulting. But there were no consulting reports, no publications, only deposits. The implication was clear. Andrew had profited from maintaining the clinic's illusion of success. Next, I looked for the people. Dr. Holt helped. He gave me a short list of former lab techs, junior doctors, and one particularly interesting name, Diana Forbes. She was a former compliance nurse who had mysteriously resigned 6 years ago. Rumor said she'd tried to flag protocol violations and was promptly silenced with a settlement. I tracked her down in a quiet neighborhood outside of town. Her house was modest, windows shuttered even in daylight. She opened the door just enough to peer out. "Claire Monroe?" she asked, cautious. When I nodded, she didn't let me in. But she handed me something. A small leather-bound notebook, old and worn. Inside, 8 years' worth of notes, patient names, dates, procedure codes, annotations, changes, red flags. At least a dozen cases showed substitutions without documentation. Andrew's initials were beside every single one. "I kept copies," Diana whispered. "They thought I destroyed everything. I never did." "Why didn't you go public?" I asked. She looked me straight in the eye. "Because men like your husband don't just have power, they have protection, lawyers, boards, alumni with favors to call in. Every time I tried, the investigation vanished." With her journal in hand, I returned to Dawson. "This is it," he said. "This gets us the subpoena. This opens the board." But I wasn't finished, because as much as I wanted to destroy Andrew's world legally, I needed something else. Personal accountability, public exposure. He built a myth, a legacy, the loving husband, the academic genius, the ethical leader. He had used me, used our children to create a story of perfection that elevated him professionally and socially. I was going to end that story. Sentence by sentence, I started recording, not secretly, just carefully. During custody negotiations, at school functions, and co-parenting and check-ins, I'd guide conversations gently toward the past. "The twins take after you," I'd say. Andrew, proud as always, would smile. "Good genes," he'd say with a wink. "Do you ever worry about them inheriting your heart condition?" I asked once. Voice casual. His expression changed, subtly. "That's not an issue," he replied. "I had them tested. They're fine." "You tested them?" "I'm their father and a doctor. I made a judgment call." Click. Save. Archive. An admission. On tape that he had made a medical decision involving genetic testing, without my knowledge, reinforcing the falsehood of a biological connection, further proof of deliberate deception. I brought it all to Dawson. He assembled the file, built a case, scheduled a meeting with the Northbridge Medical Board. Coincidentally, their annual gala was coming up, a black tie event, high profile. And guess who was set to receive an award for outstanding contribution to ethical practices in medicine? Andrew Monroe. I RSP'd the next morning. It was poetic. Andrew Monroe, father, professor, ethics champion, was to be honored with the Northbridge Medal for Integrity in Medicine at the annual faculty gala. Black tie, ballroom, velvet programs with gold embossing. His name was printed in bold on every table card. A crystal trophy waiting under stage lights, the man of the hour, the man of the lie. The invitation had arrived weeks earlier, still addressed to both of us. I almost laughed. Andrew texted me casually. "I'll be bringing Lena as my guest. Of course you're welcome to attend if that won't be awkward." I replied with practiced grace. "Of course I'll attend. You deserve the recognition." What he didn't know was that I'd already met with the board's chairwoman, Dr. Helena Strauss, 3 days prior. She'd seen the evidence. She'd scheduled a closed-door emergency session just before the gala, and she'd invited Agent Dawson to join. I chose my dress carefully. Black, sleek, structured. The one Andrew once said made me look like I was trying too hard. My hair was swept up. My earrings, diamond studs he'd gifted me after his first book launch, glinted coldly beneath the ballroom lights. I entered alone. Eyes turned, whispers flickered like matchsticks behind manicured hands. "There she is! She came! After everything!" I smiled, let them wonder. Andrew was near the stage, surrounded by admirers. Lena clung to his arm, wearing crimson satin, the same shades as the lipstick stain that started it all. They looked perfect. The professor and his protege, power and beauty, curated for display. He didn't notice me at first. He was too busy performing, but Lena did. Our eyes met. Her smile faltered just enough for me to see it. Doubt. Good. She should be nervous. Across the ballroom, behind a velvet curtain, the secret session had ended. I'd watched from a corner as Dawson laid out the case. Financial trails, medical documents, recorded conversations, testimonies from patients, staff, and one very brave nurse. One by one, the board members shifted from skepticism to grim silence. The hospital's legal counsel had already notified the district attorney's office. Uniformed officers were discreetly stationed near each exit. Andrew had no idea. He was still shaking hands. Margaret Langford, wife of the chief of surgery, leaned toward me as I sipped my champagne. "So brave of you to come tonight," she whispered. I smiled, serene. "I wouldn't miss it. Andrew deserves every bit of attention he's about to get." She blinked. Twice. The award portion of the evening began on schedule. Andrew's name was called with a flourish of orchestral strings. He stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation. Tuxedo tailored, smile rehearsed. Lena clapped first, loudest. He held the crystal trophy in both hands like a holy relic, then leaned into the microphone. "Medicine, at its core, is a matter of trust," he began. Not just between doctor and patient, but between the life you live and the person you claim to be. He looked out across the room, pausing for effect, his voice thick with conviction. Ethics isn't a checklist. It's a way of moving through the world quietly, purposefully, with integrity as your compass. The room applauded. I did not. They left for dinner soon after, at LaRue, our old spot. The one with white tablecloths and candlelight flickering off wine glasses, where he proposed, where he now planned to celebrate, with her. It was perfect. I arrived 20 minutes later. The maitre d' greeted me by name. "Right this way, Mrs. Monroe. Dr. Monroe mentioned you might join." Oh, did he now? They were seated by the window. Andrew's expression shifted from surprise to smug amusement in the moment he saw me. "Claire," he said, rising halfway. "Didn't expect—" "Please," I said, slipping into the seat across from him. "Don't stand on my account." Lena opened her mouth to speak. I held up a hand. "You should stay, Lena. After all, you've earned your seat at this table." "Miss Harrington." The color drained from her face. Andrew blinked. "What did you just say?" "I said." I leaned in. "She's Lena Harrington, daughter of Dr. Madeline Harrington, the patient whose death you falsified 5 years ago, the one who died because you were operating on 4 hours of sleep after a weekend with her daughter." Lena turned to him. "Is it true?" she whispered. Her silence was answer enough. Andrew reached for his glass. His hands shook. I pulled the cream-colored envelope from my clutch and placed it on the table. "Congratulations on your freedom," I said, echoing his words from the night of our divorce celebration. "I think you'll find what's inside clarifying." He opened it. His face collapsed. Not confusion, recognition. He knew what this was. The DNA test results. 3 children, 0 genetic connection. "This is impossible," he said, barely audible. "You ensured your sperm was never used during our IVF treatments," I said. "You falsified medical records. Lied to me for 15 years. Lied to them." Lena stood slowly. Her voice was a whisper. "You lied to me too." I nodded at her. "For what it's worth, I believe you didn't know." She didn't respond. She just walked out. Andrew stood, eyes darting toward the exit. Too late. Dr. Strauss entered the restaurant, flanked by 2 officers and Agent Dawson. Andrew turned white. "Andrew Monroe," Dawson said, voice crisp. "You're under arrest for medical fraud, financial conspiracy, and multiple violations of ethical practice under the Healthcare Integrity Act." Gas rippled through the restaurant. Andrew turned to me. "You orchestrated this?" I leaned forward, eyes calm. "You had 15 years to live your lie. I needed 3 months to tear it down." As they cuffed him, he twisted toward me, our eyes burning. "This isn't over." "No," I said softly, standing to leave. "It's just beginning." The headlines came fast. "Renowned professor arrested in fertility fraud scandal." "Andrew Monroe faces multiple felony charges." "Dozens of families seek answers from Northbridge Fertility Center." For days my phone never stopped ringing. Journalists, lawyers, former patients, even a woman I'd met once at a charity dinner who whispered on the line, "I think he did the same thing to us." The ripples spread far and wide. Andrew's assets were frozen, his medical license was suspended, his university disavowed him within 24 hours of the arrest, and the clinic temporarily shut down pending full investigation. But none of that brought me peace. Not at first. Peace didn't come in courtrooms or press statements. It came in quiet places. In watching my children sleep, knowing the love I gave them was always real. In making pancakes on Saturday morning without wondering if he'd come home. In looking in the mirror and finally seeing just me, not someone's wife, someone's shadow, someone's support system. Me, Claire, messy, imperfect, whole. 6 weeks after the arrest, Dr. Holt asked to meet. We sat in the same cafe where this had all begun. He told me the board had formed an ethics oversight committee to reform the fertility center. Then he did something I didn't expect. He offered me a seat. Not as a token, he said, but as a voice, someone who's lived the consequence of unchecked power. I hesitated. For 15 years, I was the woman behind the man, the hand behind the curtain. To step forward now felt terrifying, but also true. "I'll do it," I said, and I meant it. Sometime later, I received a letter from Lena, typed, 1 page, no return address. I didn't know about the children, she wrote. I thought I was avenging my mother. I didn't realize I was repeating the same cruelty under a different name. I hope one day you believe that. I did. Not for her, but for me. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the past. It's about cutting the cord to it. Months passed. The house no longer echoed with ghost memories. I kept it, not out of sentiment, but out of defiance. Andrew had tried to force its sale during the divorce. The courts ruled against him. The house became mine. Not the shell of a failed marriage, but the foundation of a life reclaimed. I painted the kitchen, tore up the rose bushes he loved and planted lavender instead, rearranged every piece of furniture. My children adjusted slowly. There were hard questions. I answered only what they needed to know. The rest, I'd tell them one day, when they were strong enough to understand that truth and love can exist even in contradiction. They are mine. That's all that matters. One night I met with Evelyn for coffee. She looked different, relaxed, almost warm. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Exposing it all?" I sipped my tea, thought for a long moment. "I regret that it ever needed to be exposed," I said. "But no, I don't regret the truth. Even if it hurt the kids?" I nodded. "They'll grow up knowing I didn't look away." The truth was brutal, but it was clean. It cut through the lie and cauterized the wound. And in the silence that followed, something unexpected bloomed. Freedom, not revenge, not triumph, but just space to breathe, to become, to begin again. Months later, I found myself in a writing workshop. A friend had signed me up, thinking it would be good for me. "Tell your story," the instructor said. "Not the polished one, the real one." So I did, and someone cried, and someone clapped, and someone came up after to whisper, "That sounded like me." That's the thing about stories. Even the most personal ones echo in other people's bones. Today I teach again. Not full-time, just enough. Literature, memoir. I help students find the words for what they've lived through. And now and then someone asks about my past. I don't flinch anymore. I tell them, "Once I was married to a man the world admired. He wore his lies like awards and built a reputation out of shadows. I lived in that shadow for 15 years. Then I walked out, and I learned how to live in the light.